Somewhere in the black depths of the central Atlantic Ocean, resting on the seafloor at 17,000 feet beneath the surface, lies a steel vault the size of a city block. It has been down there since June 24, 1944. Inside it, 146 bars of gold, tons of tungsten, tin, and raw rubber, opium, industrial chemicals, and something else, something the history books rarely linger on for long. Something that, had it reached its destination, might have altered not just the outcome of the Pacific War, but the nature of warfare itself. No distress signal was ever sent. No survivor ever surfaced. No debris field was found until morning, when American sailors pulled aboard a rubber sandal, some raw rubber bales, strip of black silk fishing line, and what the official record describes only as human flesh. That was all that remained of 112 men, 95 Japanese crew, 14 passengers, and 3 German naval personnel who had been threading the most audacious covert supply mission of the entire Second World War. For decades, nobody knew exactly where she rested. The Imperial Japanese Navy listed her as simply missing on the 2nd of August, 1944, to 5 full weeks after she had already sunk. The Kriegsmarine declared her lost in the Bay of Biscay. Neither was correct. She lay in none of those places. She lay alone, in waters so deep and so dark that even sunlight has never touched it, waiting. And what she carried to the bottom with her raises questions that the official wartime record was never quite designed to answer fully. What was Japan truly willing to pay, in gold, in blood, in technology, to survive a war it was already beginning to lose? What was waiting for her at the other end of that voyage? And why does a recording exist in the United States National Archives? 2 thin film canisters labeled Gordon Wire No. 1 and Gordon Wire No. 2. Dated June 24, 1944, in which an American naval aviator can be heard speaking calmly to his crew, while in the background a submarine tears itself apart in the deep. Those sounds, those canisters, are the last proof that something extraordinary happened that night, half a world away from the war the newspapers were writing about. This is the story of the I-52, Japan's golden submarine, and her shadow mission across the world. To understand what the I-52 represented, you have to understand the desperate geometry of the Axis alliance in the spring of 1944. Germany and Japan were formally bound together by the Tripartite Pact, signed in September 1940. Yet, in a very real operational sense, they were fighting 2 entirely separate wars. The distances between their theaters of combat were staggering tens of thousands of miles of Allied-controlled ocean lying between them. They shared enemies, shared rhetoric, shared the diplomatic obligations of alliance, but they did not share intelligence seamlessly. They did not coordinate their military campaigns meaningfully. And by 1944, they could not even reliably communicate raw materials or technology between one another. The surface sea lanes had been effectively shut down by Allied naval supremacy. Cargo ships attempting the route had been hunted down and sunk. The Axis powers were, in effect, 2 men fighting back-to-back in a room surrounded by opponents, unable even to pass ammunition to each other. And yet, each one desperately needed what the other had. Japan was rich in raw materials, tin, rubber, tungsten, molybdenum, the industrial lifeblood of a modern military economy. But Japan was falling dangerously behind in advanced military technology. Radar systems, acoustic torpedoes, jet engine components, sophisticated optics. Germany, on the other hand, was in the process of pioneering some of the most advanced weapons technology in human history, but was strangling for strategic raw materials to build it with. The solution, as much as any solution existed, was to tunnel beneath the Allied blockade entirely. To go under the ocean rather than across it, to send not ships, but submarines, large, specially built, intercontinental cargo submarines capable of making the voyage between the Far East and occupied Europe without surfacing in waters, where light aircraft or vessels might find them. The Japanese called these exchange missions by a single, elegant word, yanagi, meaning willow, a word that suggested flexibility, endurance, the ability to bend without breaking under pressure. The missions themselves were anything but elegant. Only a handful of submarines had ever attempted this intercontinental Yanagi run before the I-52 was selected for it. Of the 5 Japanese submarines that had previously made the attempt, I-30 in April 1942, I-8 in June 1943, 1-34 in October 1943, I-29 in November 1943, and the German U-511 in August 1943, 3 had already been lost. I-30 struck a mine. I-34 was hunted down by the British submarine HMS Taurus. I-29 was sunk by the American submarine USS Sawfish, aided by intelligence from the Ultra Code Breaking program. The odds, already punishing, were worsening with each passing month as Allied anti-submarine capabilities grew more lethal and more sophisticated. Any crew selected for this mission in early 1944 was not being sent on a routine patrol. They were being sent on something closer to a controlled gamble, one that their predecessors had lost at an alarming rate. It was in January of 1944 that Admiral Minachi Koga, commander of Japan's combined fleet, selected the vessel that would make the next attempt. She was the I-52, codenamed Momi, the Japanese word for fir tree. And she was, by the standards of any navy in the world at that moment, a remarkable machine. Designed and constructed by Mitsubishi Corporation, the I-52 was the first of only 3 Type C-3 submarines ever completed, designated formally as the Junsen Heigatakai Sensuken. The cruiser submarine Type C modified out of an original plan to build 20. Japan never built the other 17. She measured 356 feet in length, with a beam of 31 feet. Displacing 2,564 tons on the surface and 3,644 tons when submerged. She was, at the time of her construction, among the largest submarines ever built by any nation. Her cruising range exceeded 20,000 nautical miles, enough to reach the coast of occupied France from the home islands of Japan without refueling, though in practice she would make a critical stop along the way. She was capable of 7 knots on the surface and just under 6 knots submerged. Powered by twin diesel engines and electric motors. Forward, she carried 6 torpedo tubes. She had been built, however, not as a weapon of war in the conventional sense, but as an underwater freighter, a vessel designed to slip beneath the surface of an Allied-dominated ocean and carry. In her cargo hold, the industrial and scientific lifeblood of a desperate alliance. Command of the I-52 was given to Commander Kameo Uno. He was a professional naval officer of the Imperial Japanese Navy, experienced, sober in his responsibilities, and surely aware of the statistical reality confronting him. The mission he had been assigned to navigate a submarine from the Kurai Naval Base in Japan, cross the Pacific approach routes, through the Indian Ocean, around the Cape of Good Hope, across the South Atlantic, and into the port of Lorient on the coast of Nazi-occupied France, would cover more than 30,000 miles in total, round trip through waters increasingly patrolled by a hostile force that was, by mid-1944, decoding Axis communications with terrifying efficiency. Ono would have 94 officers and enlisted men under his command, along with 14 civilian passengers, primarily Japanese technicians, who were to be delivered to Germany, there to study and absorb the secrets of German acoustic weapons and torpedo assay and design to be up to stup to a Louvre, with stellis at Kerpu to Picate by Brisant Rado Kai, with a Hosaico how to Saoyan Squai Hux Gassets its Deleta sa Ikgaka Glides, the Ayu La to Rothly Subdakai to Akli I to put Chamai that it's a Katsrake boy to that cop that sit as a sito or whatever Paula and the Arroy to out stuff a big pay a bake or bus and take Monroe speak a sick big dismiss the worst and the still and a little well it's sensitive government Muslim the sunset. In total, 109 souls would depart with him, and before they were done, 3 more would join them from the sea. On the 10th of March, 1944, the I-52 left Kure Naval Base, bound first for Sasaba and then south for Singapore. She rode low in the water, her cargo hold already dense with the materials Japan was using as currency to purchase German ingenuity. Packed into her hull were 11 tons of tungsten, a metal essential for hardening steel and manufacturing precision machine tools, along with 9.8 tons of molybdenum, used in high-temperature alloys critical for aircraft engines and armor plate. There were 3 tons of opium bound for pharmaceutical processing in Germany. There were 54 kilograms of pure caffeine, and most significantly, locked inside 49 metal boxes. Stacked in the darkness of the cargo hold and weighing a total of 2 tons were 146 bars of gold. This was not decorative gold, not ceremonial gold. This was payment cold, transactional, strategic payment for the technological secrets Japan intended to carry home. The gold was meant to purchase, among other things, advanced German optical technology that Japanese engineers had not yet been able to replicate independently. Every bar had been accounted for. Every bar had a purpose. And every bar now sits, still in those 49 metal boxes at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. In Singapore, the I-52 loaded additional cargo. Another 120 tons of tin in ingots were taken aboard, along with 8 tons of raw rubber in heavy bales, and 3 tons of quinine, the anti-malarial drug that remained vital in the Pacific theater. The submarine was, by this point, carrying enough raw material to strain the imagination when contemplating it, all sealed inside a steel hull. She then transited the Indian Ocean, observing strict protocols of caution, submerging during daylight hours to avoid detection from Allied aircraft operating out of British bases in the region, surfacing only at night to run the diesel engines and recharge the massive battery banks. On the 15th of May, 1944, after weeks of this silent, exhausting discipline, she rounded the Cape of Good Hope and entered the South Atlantic. Commander Uno sent his first radio message confirming safe passage. It was a moment of genuine relief, and though neither Unknown nor his crew could have known it, a moment of catastrophic consequence. Because that message, like so many before it, was being read by men who were not Japanese. The Ultra Intelligence Program, the Allied code-breaking effort centered at Bletchley Park in England, which had cracked the German Enigma machine and numerous Japanese naval codes had been tracking the I-52 since her departure from Kure. American naval intelligence had been decoding her traffic signals for months, watching her progress across the ocean with a precision that Uno could not have imagined and would never discover. When the I-52 acknowledged a message from Berlin on the 6th of June, 1944, the same day, by dark coincidence, that Allied forces were storming the beaches of Normandy, she included her current position in the reply. It was a standard procedure, a routine transmission, and it was perhaps the single most consequential radio message Commander Uno ever sent. American intelligence intercepted it within hours. The exact location of one of Japan's most secret and strategically vital submarines was now known to the enemy. What came next was not a hunt. It was a convergence. The return cargo awaiting the I-52 in Germany was, if anything, even more extraordinary than what she was carrying outbound. Intelligence decrypts revealed that stacked at the dockside in Lorjang, 35 to 40 tons of secret documents, technical drawings, and advanced weaponry had been assembled for loading T-5 acoustic torpedoes capable of homing in on the sound of a ship's propellers, components of the Jumo 213A engine used in the long-nosed Focke-Wulf FW-190D fighter aircraft, radar equipment, vacuum tubes, precision ball bearings, bomb sights, specialty alloy steel, and optical glass. Any one of these technologies successfully transferred to Japan and put into production might have measurably extended the Pacific War. But there was one item on the return manifest that stands apart from all the others. According to Ultra Decrypts, 800 kilograms of uranium oxide to 1,760 pounds had been prepared in Germany for loading onto the I-52 for transport back to Japan. Analysts have since assessed that the quantity of unenriched uranium oxide involved would not have been sufficient to construct a functioning atomic weapon, but it was potentially sufficient for another purpose. The speculated intent, supported by the broader context of Japanese unconventional weapons research in 1944, was the construction of a radiological dispersal weapon, what today we would call a dirty bomb, for potential use against the American mainland. Whether that interpretation is correct, whether Japan truly intended to weaponize uranium oxide in this fashion, remains a matter of historical debate to this day. What is not debated is that the material existed, that it was intended for the I-52, and that it never reached her, because she was already running out of time. In the dark, warm waters west of the Cape Verde Islands on the night of the 22nd of June, 1944, the I-52 made her planned rendezvous with the German submarine U-530, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Kurt Lange. At coordinates 15 degrees north, 40 degrees west, a featureless patch of open ocean, 1,574 kilometers from the nearest land, the two submarines surfaced under cover of darkness. Supplies and personnel were carefully transferred between them in the open sea. No small feat. Fuel was passed to the I-52. A Naxos Fube 7 radar detector was transferred aboard, a device designed to warn a submarine when Allied aircraft were sweeping the area with radar. An Enigma coding machine was delivered, and 3 German naval personnel came aboard the I-52, 2 radar operators, petty officers Kurt Schultz and Rolf Behrendt, and a German liaison officer, Commander Alfred Schaefer, who would guide the vessel the remaining distance to Loryang. In the confusion of the transfer, the Naxos radar detector briefly fell into the sea, and in a small moment that would later be remembered as almost unbearably poignant, a Japanese sailor jumped in after it, retrieving it from the dark water and hauling it back aboard. He wanted, it seems, to ensure that his ship had every possible protection for the final leg of the voyage. The I-52 now had everything she needed. The U-530 detached and headed for Trinidad. The I-52 turned her bow toward Loryang and began to run on the surface, making speed. She was close. Perhaps 2 weeks from port, and aboard her, 112 men, young Japanese sailors, veteran officers, civilian technicians, and now 3 German personnel settled into the rhythms of a submarine that believed, however cautiously, that it might actually make it. The hull around them groaned with the pressure of the sea. The air tasted of oil and metal and the particular stale warmth that fills a closed steel tube. Carrying too many human bodies through too many miles of ocean, the diesel engines throbbed beneath their feet. Somewhere in the darkness of the cargo hold, 146 bars of gold lay sealed in their metal boxes, waiting to purchase a future that was already, in ways no one aboard could know, being foreclosed upon. Above them, the South Atlantic sky was dark and opaque. And moving through that sky, already vectoring toward them with instruments they could not yet hear, was a Grumman TBF-1C Avenger torpedo bomber from the escort carrier USS Bogue, piloted by Lieutenant Commander Jesse D. Taylor, carrying a weapon so new and so secret that even its name had been classified, a weapon that did not wait for a submarine to surface, but followed it down into the dark by listening to the sound of its own propellers. The I-52 had come 30,000 miles. She was, by any measure of human endurance and naval engineering, a remarkable achievement. And she had approximately 1 hour left.